Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. We're moving to the next stage of the pandemic, and as the world resets to the new normal, we find ourselves seeking the right balance between health and livelihood, constantly adjusting the boundaries between liberty and responsibility. On tonight's headlines. Thousands of South Korean doctors and medical staff are on strike, protesting against the government proposal to increase the annual intake of medical students in order to increase the number of doctors and medical specialists. The Philippine Army identified the two female suicide bombers who carried out the twin bombings in Honolulu as militants' widows. Two prominent Hong Kong opposition lawmakers were among more than a dozen people arrested on Wednesday in a police operation focused on last year's huge protests, part of a widening crackdown against the city's democracy. And one person was shot dead and another two were injured in the U.S. city of Kenosha on Tuesday night, according to media reports, as groups clashed during protests over the police shooting of a black man. Thousands of South Korean doctors and medical staff went on strike against the government proposal to increase the annual intake of medical students in order to increase the number of doctors and medical specialists, especially in regions outside the capital and metropolitan areas, to battle the imbalance of medical workforce across different regions. Take a look.
감사합니다. 여러분, 저희가 이 필수 회장님
왜냐하면 아무리 정원을 늘려도 깊이가에 있는 의사들이 처우가 개선되지 않으면 오지 않을 거기 때문에 큰 문제가 없습니다. 하지만 그럼에도 불구하고 이 정책이 잘못됐다고 얘기하는 건 단순히 수 증가한다고 해서 문제 해결하는 게 아닌데 대화를 하지도 않고 답을 정해놓고 의사들이 이렇게 강하게 주장하는 것 자체가 잘못됐다고 이야기하는 정부의 문제를 지적하기 위해서 나왔습니다.
The government policy aims to increase the annual intake of medical students by 400 to be better prepared for public health crisis. However, the Korean Medical Association, or KMA, which organized the protest, argues that fundamental problems surrounding the conditions of doctors and staff have to be addressed rather than simply increasing the number of medical students, which would only lead to further disparity and lack of proper training and experience for those stationed away from the capital region. There is most likely only a slim possibility of people being reinfected with COVID-19, according to the UN Health Agency. The World Health Organization comment follows reports in Hong Kong that a man had contracted the new coronavirus for a second time after an interval of more than 4 months. Here's WHO spokesperson Dr. Margaret Harris speaking in Geneva.
The important thing here is that this is clear documentation. So we've had anecdotal reports every now and then of people who've tested negative then tested positive, and it hasn't been clear up until this case whether that was simply a problem with testing or whether people were getting infected a second time. The other important thing to note is the numbers are very, very small. So this is one documented case in over 23 million, and we will probably see other documented cases, but it seems to be not a regular event. We would have seen many more cases. But it's very important to understand what this means in terms of immunity, and this is why we have got a lot of research groups actually tracking people, measuring antibodies, trying to understand how long the immune protection lasts, the natural immune protection, and that should be understood as it is not the same as the immune protection that a vaccine provides.
She also said that priorities for the UN Health Agency include understanding what this means in terms of people's immunity. Now, to do this, the WHO is working with many research groups to track infected people and measure antibodies in an attempt to understand how long natural immune protection lasts. In other news, Australia betrayed China with calls for an investigation into the origins of the coronavirus, according to a Beijing envoy on Wednesday, likening the moves to Brutus plotting against Julius Caesar. Take a look. Mr. Wang Xining, the Chinese embassy's deputy head of mission, made the remarks in a rare public address as he spoke of the indignation, anger, and frustration felt by China at Australia's push for a global inquiry. It is approximately identical to Julius Caesar in his final days when he saw Brutus approaching him, according to Mr. Wang. The virus was first detected in the central Chinese city of Wuhan late last year and has gone on to kill more than 800,000 people around the world. China insists the source of the virus remains unknown, a position Mr. Wang repeated on Wednesday. But China reacted with fury when Australia led calls in April for the independent probe into the virus. Beijing subsequently imposed tariffs on Australian goods and warned Chinese tourists and students against visiting the country, citing alleged racial harassment against Asians. Expanding on Beijing's reaction, Mr. Wang said Australia had singled out China in its call for an inquiry and had not given any notice of its plans. Mr. Wang said Australia had hurt the feelings of China's 1.4 billion people with its actions. The UK government has changed its mind on masks in English schools. Let's find out what this means. Here's Jennifer Ringwood from our EBC UK Bureau. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, Alma. Good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Go ahead.
Right, so here from the United Kingdom, the government has, as you said, reversed the policy on wearing face masks in schools in England, sparking fresh criticism about its handling of the coronavirus outbreak. So Alma the ministers had previously insisted that face coverings were not necessary when children go back to school from next week, after nearly 6 months out of the classroom, amid the concern about the rise in infections. Based on the new guidance late on Tuesday, the British government advised that secondary schools, students and staff should wear face coverings in corridors and communal areas. The change is being seen as yet another U-turn, just weeks after ministers were forced to scrap the use of an algorithm which gave 17 and 18-year-olds lower than expected grades. Teaching unions have been called from English schools to follow guidance in Scotland, which has a separate education system that requires to cover their nose and mouth between lessons. While welcoming the changes, critics, including the main opposition Labour Party, said ministers had shirked their responsibility by leaving enforcement to individual schools. Labour's education spokesman Kate Green slammed a half-baked U-turn, saying the government should have given clear guidance and a plan to deliver it. She said, under fire, Education Secretary Gavin Williamson had insisted masks were not required in schools, and Prime Minister Boris Johnson's office said there was no plan to review the policy. Now, Williamson, who's been widely blamed for the furore over the exam results, said on Wednesday that government would now follow World Health Organization advice for children aged 12 and over to wear masks. He said outside of local lockdown areas, face coverings won't be required in schools. Those schools will have the flexibility to introduce measures if they believe it is right in their specific circumstances. He continued, I hope these steps will provide parents, pupils and teachers further reassurance. Some 41,500 people have now died in the coronavirus outbreak in Britain. That's one of the worst death tolls in Europe. The government response to the pandemic has been criticised quite widely. Ministers were accused of not reacting quickly enough, failing to ensure enough protective equipment for frontline health and social care workers, and over the testing regime. London reversed policy on the wearing of face masks in shops in England after initially saying they were not necessary, and was forced to backtrack on planned reopening of primary schools in July. Education is a devolved issue for regional governments in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Older students in Northern Ireland will be asked to wear face coverings outside classrooms from next week. So, I mean, there's a disparity across the United Kingdom, and it just seems to be dependent on each area, region, whether you're in Wales, whether you're in London, what you're actually going to follow. It's not really a unified approach. The Welsh Assembly in Cardiff is due to make its decision on Wednesday, so that will be later on today. Back to you, Alma.
But wasn't this guideline just released by WHO about 5 days ago?
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. In Scotland, we heard yesterday that they would already want students and teachers to be wearing face coverings in hallways and public areas. So I guess we can see the reason for the criticism. It's one of those things. We could have been doing this all at the same time, couldn't we?
But which pupils might be exempt from wearing a mask?
That's a good question. I mean, exemptions, as far as I know, they include those who cannot put on or wear or remove a face covering because of a physical or a mental illness or impairment or other sort of disability. If a person is speaking or in some way providing assistance to someone who relies on lip reading or a clear sound and facial expression to communicate, so those people are the ones who are being exempt. And for them, the government says there isn't any need for them to have a letter from a medical profession to prove that they have a reason for not wearing a face covering. But what other studies have found is those people who are actually exempt, they would prefer to be able to have proof. Something was suggested that they could perhaps download an exemption card from the government website. Further to this, Asthma UK have actually released some statements, and they've said that most people with asthma are able to wear a face mask, but there are some who may find that will cause them an asthma attack. It doesn't reduce the oxygen supply to them, so they could conceivably wear it. But again, if the person, it aggravates their asthma, if in any way it helps them to feel breathless, then they of course need to not wear it.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for all that update. Very good. Thank you so much. And you stay safe, stay healthy.
Thank you, Alma. It's good to see you again. I'm Jennifer Ringwood from EBC United Kingdom, and we live in interesting times.
Meanwhile, the CDC is recommending travelers to avoid all non-essential international travels to Maldives. Steffi Dewan joins us live from the beautiful island of Maldives. Hello, Steffi.
Hi, Alma. Nice to be back.
Okay, good. Good to see you back. All right, so all non-essential international travels is recommended by the CDC no non-essential international travels to Maldives right now. So go ahead.
Yes, Alma. So that's the latest news for today. The United States Health Protection Agency Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, on Monday issued a level 3 warning regarding travel to Maldives, declaring that the COVID-19 risk in Maldives is high. CDC recommended passengers to avoid all non-essential international travel to the island nation. According to CDC, older adults, people of any age with certain underlying medical conditions, and others at increased risk for severe illness should consider postponing all travel, including essential travel to Maldives. After recording significantly low numbers in the months of May and June, the island nation recorded an upsurge in the number of COVID-19 cases per capita in late July and August, indicating an alarming community spread in the country. With the increasing number of infections, the number of recoveries has also risen in the past couple of weeks. After the recent spike reduced the total amount of recovered patients from the peak 86 to the lowest 53%, the value currently stands at 62%. The number of COVID-19 cases skyrocketed after the state initiated efforts to steer the country towards a new normal with a paced easing of lockdown restrictions across the Greater Mali region. Maldives currently records total 6,779 confirmed cases and 2,530 active COVID-19 cases, along with 4,222 recoveries and 27 deaths. In an attempt to kickstart the country's tourism industry amidst the economic repercussion caused by the pandemic, Maldives reopened its borders on July 15. Almost 4 months after closing its air and sea borders to tourist arrivals on March 27. Only 5,177 tourists arrived in Maldives between July 15th and August 15th. To illustrate the magnitude of the difference between pre-COVID statistics and current figures, tourist arrivals for June 2020 represent 1.3% of the arrivals in 2019. Holidaymakers arriving in Maldives are required to observe social distancing measures and wear face masks in accordance with the Health Protection Agency or HPA's regulations. While all passengers will undergo thermal screening, individuals with high temperatures, breathing difficulties, or other symptoms will be referred to the airport clinic. The restrictions on international travel left Maldives' heavily tourism-reliant economy in an extremely vulnerable state. In mid-April, the World Bank projected that Maldives would be worst-hit economy in the South Asian region due to the pandemic. Maldives estimated a shortfall of approximately $400 million or 6.9 billion MBR in foreign currency and state deficit of 13 billion MBR in 2020 as a result of COVID-19 pandemic's impact on the tourism industry. In addition to Maldives, CDC has also issued level 3 warnings on all other countries of South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation or SAARC, including Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Australia, United Kingdom, Germany, France were also declared as high-risk countries by the CDC. Back to you, Alma.
All right, thank you very much. Looking forward to more updates there in Maldives. Thank you, Steffi.
Thank you so much, Alma, reporting live from Maldives. This is Steffi Dihuan, and we live in interesting times.
Indeed. Now, earlier this week, the Surgeon General of the United States, Dr. Jerome Adams, was in Hawaii to assure the state government and the city-county of Honolulu that help is on the way as the Aloha State continues to receive new cases in triple digits. He also points out that certain ethnic groups are among the hardest hit by the coronavirus. For more, here's Ron Hamilton.
Earlier today at the Honolulu Fire Department headquarters, Mayor Kurt Caldwell announced that a second stay-at-home, work-from-home emergency order has been approved by Governor David Ige and will take effect on Thursday, August 27th. During a press briefing, Mayor Caldwell pointed out the main objectives of the latest order.
One, we're going to be doing surge testing for the next 2 weeks. 5,000 tests a day. That's 70,000 tests in 14 days. No city has actually hit the 5,000 level, but we're working hard to do so. Number two, more contact tracing. The city wants to join that effort and wants to hire somewhere between 250 and 500 contact tracers to work in coordination with the Department of Health and General Hara to do a more aggressive approach to contact tracing.
In addition, the mayor and U.S. Surgeon General Jerome Adams emphasized that a couple ethnic groups had been disproportionately affected by the coronavirus.
When we find those positives, they cannot be quarantined with other members of their family who continue to go to work and spread the virus, particularly in our Pacific Islander community and in our Filipino American community, where we see an increasing number of cases.
And you heard the mayor mention that the Filipino community has been particularly hard hit. I got data this morning over at Kapiolani Hospital that helped illustrate the fact that the Filipino community has been hard hit in terms of numbers of people dying and percentages of people dying from this virus. We know that people from the Pacific Islands represent about 4% of the population here in Hawaii, but about 30% of the cases. That is astounding. That is astounding to me, and that's why we want to make sure our surge testing is allowing us to get some visibility into those communities.
Honolulu City Council member Joy Manahan, himself a Filipino American representing one of Hawaii's largest Filipino communities, had some frustration that Honolulu should have been allowed to invest in more preventative measures back in the spring when new cases were still in the single digits.
Early on, we tried to get testing into the community health centers, but the state government's decision not to test and trace while the curve is flat is now stressing our health systems and the economy. The DOH tied the city's hands when we offered to test communities on the front line of the pandemic back in April. Testing on Oahu has not been equitable. The state's decision to coordinate testing with hospitals only is proving costly for our working families who access their health care at a federally qualified community health center. I'm glad that the federal government and the county are stepping in to provide more social justice and equity in the current testing and tracing programs. This is welcome news, not just for me in my district, but really for the county of Oahu and for the state of Hawaii. So I'm really looking forward to this new effort. I hope we can get a handle on it while the curve is flat, and I'm confident with everybody here helping, we can.
To recall, back in early May, Eagle News reported on a study by the University of Hawaii School of Medicine stating that the highest rate of COVID-19 cases in several U.S. states, including Hawaii, are among Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders, more than any other racial and ethnic groups. From Honolulu, Hawaii, this is Ron Hamilton for Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Ron. North Korean state media on Wednesday showed leader Kim Jong-un at a meeting of a top committee issuing warnings about the coronavirus and a looming typhoon following international speculation over his state of health. Take a look. Now, Mr. Kim's comments come amid conjecture over his condition after South Korea's spy agency said he had delegated some authority to his sister Kim Yo-jong to relieve his governance stress. A former aide to late South Korean President Kim Dae-jung even said on Facebook he thought the North's leader was in a coma, though with no apparent evidence. But Kim presided over a meeting Tuesday of a top committee of the ruling Workers' Party. The official KCNA news agency reported where he assessed defects in the state emergency anti-epidemic work for checking the inroads of the malignant virus. The impoverished North, whose crumbling health system would struggle to cope with a major virus outbreak, has not confirmed a single case of the disease that has swept the world since first emerging in neighboring China. Last month, Pyongyang imposed a lockdown on the city of Kaesong, close to the border with the South, claiming a defector who had returned was suspected of carrying the virus. The restrictions were lifted earlier this month and the infection was never confirmed. The meeting also discussed emergency measures to prevent crop damage or casualties from Typhoon Bavi, which is forecast to hit the country this week. In other news, two prominent Hong Kong opposition lawmakers were among more than a dozen people arrested on Wednesday in a police operation focused on last year's huge protests, part of a widening crackdown against the city's democracy camp. Lam Cheuk-ting and Ted Wei were detained after early morning raids on their homes, adding to the mounting toll of prosecutions targeting Beijing's critics in the restless financial hub. Both are minority pro-democracy lawmakers in the city's partially elected legislature and vocal critics of Beijing, as well as Hong Kong's government and the police. This is out-and-out political persecution, according to James Taw, a veteran lawyer and member of their Democratic Party. Police said Wednesday's arrests were related to two anti-government rallies last year, one on July 6 and the other on July 21, the latter a day that saw a notorious attack by government loyalists on protesters in the town of Yunlong. The brazen assault by more than 100 mostly white-clad men armed with wooden and metal poles helped fuel months of increasing violent protests. Police have charged 8 people over the attack and some with links to triad organized crime gangs. But they are now describing the clash as being between evenly matched rivals. The year-long attack, which was streamed live, was a defining moment of last year's pro-democracy protests. Democracy supporters, including Lam and Wei, have accused police of deliberately arriving late to the scene, allowing the attackers to leave, and botching the subsequent investigation, allegations the force has denied. Beginning in early June 2019, Hong Kong was hit by 7 straight months of huge and often violent pro-democracy protests in which more than 9,000 people were arrested. 2 people were shot dead on Tuesday night in the U.S. city of Kenosha as groups clashed during protests over the police shooting of a black man. Violence broke out as hundreds of protesters marched for a 3rd night in the Wisconsin city after Jacob Blake was seen in video footage being shot several times at a point-blank range by a white police officer. Blake was trying to get into his car with his 3 children inside when he was shot on Sunday. The most recent police shooting of an African American has sparked renewed outrage and protests in U.S. cities, including New York and Minneapolis, as part of the Black Lives Matter movement. The Kenosha Police Department said local officers, along with assisting agencies, responded to reports of shots being fired and multiple gunshot victims. Shortly before midnight, the shooting resulted in 2 fatalities, and 3rd gunshot victim was transported to a hospital with serious but non-life-threatening injuries, according to the department in a tweet, adding the investigation was active and ongoing. Earlier, footage was posted online showing people running through the streets of Kenosha as gunshots rang out, while other videos showed wounded men lying on the ground. Earlier, Blake's mother, Julia Jackson, called for calm and urged peace ahead of a national protest planned for Washington this weekend. She said the damage caused on previous nights in Kenosha, quote, doesn't reflect my son or my family, and issued a powerful call for unity and denunciation of racism in America. First Lady Melania Trump put a kinder, gentler sheen on President Trump's re-election campaign with a star turn at the Republican convention Tuesday, where she broke ranks to speak compassionately about coronavirus victims and recalled her own immigrant story in an appeal for racial harmony. Unlike often aggressive speeches by 2 of President Trump's children from previous marriages, Eric and Tiffany, the First Lady brought a soft touch to her keynote address from the White House's Rose Garden. Take a look.
Growing up as a young child in Slovenia, which was under communist rule at the time, I always heard about an amazing place called America, a land that stood for freedom and opportunity. As I grew older, it became my goal to move to the United States and follow my dream of working in the fashion industry. My parents worked very hard to ensure our family could not only live and prosper in America, but also contribute to a nation that allows for people to arrive with a dream and make it reality. He's not a traditional politician. He doesn't just speak words. He demands action and he gets results. The future of our country has always been very important to him, and it is something that I have always admired. I like to call on the citizens of this country to take a moment, pause, and look at things from all perspectives. I urge people to come together in a civil manner so we can work and live up to our standard American ideals. I also ask people to stop the violence and looting being done in the name of justice, and never make assumptions based on the color of a person's skin. I want to acknowledge the fact that since March, our lives have changed drastically. The invisible enemy, COVID-19, swept across our beautiful country and impacted all of us. My deepest sympathy goes out to everyone who has lost a loved one, and my prayers are with those who are ill or suffering. As you have heard this evening, I don't want to use this precious time attacking the other side, because as we saw last week, that kind of talk only serves to divide the country further. I'm here because we need my husband to be our president and commander-in-chief for 4 more years. He is what is best for our country. We all know Donald Trump makes no secrets about how he feels about things. Total honesty is what we as citizens deserve from our president. Whether you like it or not, you always know what he's thinking. And that is because he's an authentic person who loves this country and its people and wants to continue to make it better.
Now, in a convention speech taped a day prior in Jerusalem, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo hailed President Trump's work on foreign affairs, including ending ridiculously unfair trade deals with China and the controversial moving of the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem in 2018. Take a look.
I have a big job as Susan's husband and Nick's dad. Susan and Nick are more safe and their freedoms more secure because President Trump has put his America First vision into action. It may not have made him popular in every foreign capital, but it's worked. In China, he's pulled back the curtain on the predatory aggression of the Chinese Communist Party. The president has held China accountable for covering up the China virus and allowing it to spread death and economic destruction in America and around the world. And he will not rest until justice is done. And he has ended the ridiculously unfair trade arrangement with China that punched a hole in our economy. Those jobs are coming back home. Today, because of President Trump, NATO is stronger, Ukraine has defensive weapon systems, and America left a harmful treaty so our nation can now build missiles to deter Russian aggression. And in the Middle East, when Iran threatened, the president approved a strike that killed the Iranian terrorist, Qasim Suleimani. This is the man most responsible for the murder and maiming of hundreds of American soldiers and thousands of Christians across the Middle East. The president, too, moved the U.S. Embassy to this very city of God, Jerusalem, the rightful capital of the Jewish homeland. And just 2 weeks ago, the president brokered a historic peace deal between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. This is a deal that our grandchildren will read about in their history books.
Philippine Army Commander Lieutenant General Cirilito Sobihana identified the 2 female suicide bombers who carried out the twin bombings in Honolulu that killed at least 15 people and wounded more than 70 others on Monday. He identified the female bombers as Inda Nai and Nana. In a text message to reporters, Sobihana said Nana was the wife of Norman Lasuca, who is considered the Philippines' first homegrown suicide bomber. Lasuca and another attacker blew themselves up outside a military camp on Holo in June 2019, killing several soldiers and civilians. Inda Nai was the wife of Tala Jumsa, also known as Abu Tala, who acted as liaison between Abu Sayyaf and the Islamic State group. He was killed in a November shootout with security forces on Holo. Authorities are checking if Nana was Indonesian. Sobihana has called for martial law to be imposed in Sulu, a chain of islands that has long been a stronghold of Abu Sayyaf, to bring back normality and enable the military to control the movement of people. But Defense Secretary Delfin Lorenzana has rejected the request. Monday's explosions happened near a Catholic cathedral on Holo, where 2 suicide bombers blew themselves up in January 2019, killing 21 people. Now that attack was blamed on a group linked to Abu Sayyaf. The Court of Appeals has denied a motion for reconsideration filed by Rappler Chief Executive Officer Maria Ressa, asking to reconsider its order disallowing her to travel abroad pending an appeal of her libel conviction before a Manila court. The Appellate Court's Special 14th Division, through Associate Justice Geraldine C. Fiel Macaraig, said in its resolution dated August 20 and released on Wednesday, said, in view of the foregoing, Ressa still failed to prove that her intended travel to the U.S. and her physical presence in the events are necessary and urgent. To reiterate, video conferencing may allow her to participate in the events without leaving the Philippines, unquote. Ressa has asked the court to reconsider its 7-page resolution dated August 18, where the court has said that while the lower courts had previously allowed her to leave the country, Ressa's subsequent conviction changes her situation. The CA also said Ressa failed to show the necessity and urgency of her request to travel to the U.S. from August 23 to September 19 this year. Associate Justices Dantan Q. Becer and Carlito B. Calpatura concurred in this decision. The Appellate Court also found no sufficient evidence to justify the intention of the co-founder of Rappler to personally receive an award. The Office of the Solicitor General, or OSG, the CA said, also successfully demonstrated that Ressa's intended travel is not necessary and urgent because there are other ways for her to participate in the U.S. event. The OSG earlier opposed Ressa's request to travel abroad, noting that she had voluntarily agreed to restrict her right to travel after she had posted bail for her temporary liberty. Her conviction warrants stricter restriction against her privilege to travel abroad. Aside from her conviction, pending tax evasion charges and a second cyber libel complaint as among the circumstances that prevent her to travel abroad, the OSG said Ressa's views on the Philippine justice system make her a flight risk. Before her conviction on the cyber libel complaint filed by businessman Wilfredo Keng, Ressa had been previously allowed by the Manila court to leave upon posting a 100,000 peso bond. Ressa was subsequently found guilty along with former writer Reynaldo Santos Jr. on June 15 by the Manila Regional Trial Court Branch 46 and sentenced up to 6 years imprisonment. Eagle News will be right back. At least 46 people have been killed and hundreds of houses destroyed by flash floods as torrential rains lashed the city north of Afghan capital. Take a look. A rescue operation was underway to free people trapped in the rubble of collapsed buildings in Charikar, capital of Parwan province, which was hit by heavy rain overnight. The Ministry of Public Health said in a statement that at least 46 people had been killed in Parwan and about 80 injured, according to Wahida Shakar, spokeswoman for the region's governor, and put the death toll at 66, with more than 90 people injured and over 500 houses destroyed. President Ashraf Ghani ordered emergency relief to be sent to Charikar. The presidential palace said in a statement, flash floods were also reported in other provinces. Earlier this month, 16 people, including 15 children, were killed and dozens of houses were destroyed when flash floods ravaged a village in the eastern province of Nagarhar. Last week, the United States faced extreme heat risks. This week, it's the turn of floods and wildfires, according to UN weather experts. Announcing the alert, the World Meteorological Organization shared the announcement that Tropical Storm Laura has now developed into a hurricane after gathering strength in the Gulf of Mexico. Take a look.
Yes. Okay. So this time last week, I was briefing you on the extreme heat in the United States. And now 1 week later, we're facing two major hazards from floods and from fire. So let's talking about the floods first of all. The very active Atlantic tropical cyclone season is continuing. Tropical Storm Laura has developed and is expected to strengthen into a hurricane later today. This is according to the U.S. National Hurricane Center. Laura's then expected to strengthen on Wednesday and could be a strong Category 2 when it approaches the U.S. coast. The U.S. National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, recently updated its hurricane season outlook to predict 19 to 25 named storms, of which 7 to 11 of these are expected to be hurricanes, and 3 to 6 will be major hurricanes. So that's Category 3 level and above. We're just entering the phase of the Atlantic hurricane season, which is traditionally the most active. We normally say, from about the 20th of August onwards. So obviously, it's a situation which is of concern, and obviously the emergency preparations and response are complicated by the COVID pandemic. One of the concerns, certainly at the weekend, was that Laura would combine with another named storm, Marco, to hit the same region at about the same time. Now, the worst case scenario, luckily, was averted. Marco fizzled out overnight. But we still will see, the impacts of the heavy rainfall from Tropical Storm Marco combined with what is expected to be very, very heavy rainfall and flooding from Tropical Storm Hurricane Laura.
Hurricane and storm surge watches are now in place for portions of the northwestern Gulf Coast, according to U.S. authorities. Speaking to journalists, WMO spokesperson Claire Nulles said that the U.S. National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency believed that Laura would escalate to a Category 2 storm when she reaches the U.S. coast. Meanwhile, Texas and Louisiana residents evacuated flood zones and boarded up windows as Hurricane Laura barreled towards the coastline after earlier causing 25 deaths in the Caribbean. Take a look.
They're going around picking up people who do not have transportation or who need a ride. We're getting them here, we're registering them, and then we're getting them on coach buses to take them to somewhere safe.
Had to go because it was going to be a bad storm and it was going to hit. We was going to try to ride it out at the house, but we found out that, it was going to be too bad.
After we get loaded on the bus, they're going to take us around to the other side, and they're going to bring our dogs to us. And they organized everything really well, pretty much.
Changed a little bit since it's been a pandemic because we've actually had to go into COVID, and people that come in, they get their hand sprayed with sanitizer, they're having their temperature checks, and they were also spacing everybody in 6-foot distancing.
The storm's maximum sustained winds were nearing 150 kilometers per hour with gusts higher, the U.S. National Hurricane Center reported, and forecasters expect it to strengthen significantly in the next 24 hours. Laura is expected to be a major hurricane at landfall, according to the center. It is forecast to reach the Texas or Louisiana coast on Wednesday night. Storm surges could reach up to 14 feet in places and will be accompanied by large and destructive waves, according to the NHC. The center warned that the storm surges could reach up to 30 miles or 48 kilometers inland from the southwestern Louisiana and southeastern Texas coastlines. Meanwhile, Texas Governor Greg Abbott said Laura could reach Category 4 status, the second highest wind, with winds of up to 156 miles per hour. The governor said compared to Category 3 Hurricane Harvey, which caused catastrophic flooding and killed 68 people in 2017, this is going to be more of a wind event. Take a look.
Oncoming Hurricane Laura, and as many people know, is anticipated to be a Category 3 hurricane. We need to be prepared for the possibility that it could increase to be a Category 4 hurricane. A lot of people in the weather sector have repeatedly said that this is something that's going to be very similar to Hurricane Ike and Hurricane Rita. So people who have memory banks that relate to that can remember what that was like, and this should be very much like this. It likely, however, will not be a replication of Hurricane Harvey. I think we need to pause for a moment and recognize, and that is, today is the 3rd year anniversary of when Hurricane Harvey struck the state of Texas. At that time, and for many days following that, Texas was battered, we were bruised, but we were not broken. Remember, just because a hurricane is coming to Texas does not mean that COVID-19 either has or is going to leave Texas. COVID-19 is going to be in Texas throughout the course of the hurricane. As a result, everyone must ensure that they protect their lives also from contracting COVID-19. One of the safe ways you can do that if you're having to evacuate is to try to evacuate to a hotel or motel room so that you and your family members can be isolated from others with whom you could come into contact with whom you could contract COVID-19.
Laura also threatens the major oil refining centers of Lake Charles, Louisiana, and Beaumont Port Arthur, Texas, located near the coast. Evacuations have been underway since the morning in areas most at risk, especially on the coast where the water could rise up to 3 meters. Several emergency shelters opened on Tuesday in Texas with health precautions in place to fight the spread of COVID-19. In other environment news, Australia's devastating 2019 to 2020 bushfires were clearly fueled by climate change, according to a government inquiry reported on Tuesday following some of the largest forest fires ever recorded worldwide. With this year's fire season already underway, authorities recommended urgent action to limit the impact of extreme blazes, expected to become more frequent in the future. The deadly bushfires raged for 9 months to March and were most severe in New South Wales State, where 11,000 fires burned over 5.5 million hectares, the size of many countries. The report noted it was impossible to say what precise role climate change had played in producing the complex range of climatic conditions that helped fuel the fires. Now, those conditions included a years-long drought, high winds, thunderstorms, and low humidity. Many of the largest fires were caused by lightning strikes in remote areas, according to the document. The report's recommendations largely focused on disaster response and mitigation, including the use of technology to detect remote fires more quickly and increased aerial water bombing to stop them growing beyond control. And the inaugural live stream of penguins waddling to their burrows drew hundreds of thousands of viewers on Tuesday as the Australian park on Phillip Island, normally a popular tourist attraction, remains closed amid a statewide lockdown in response to a resurgence of virus cases. Take a look. The live stream will continue daily as rangers attempt to share the penguins with a global audience. Before the pandemic, going to watch the penguin colonies on Phillip Island, about 2 hours drive from Melbourne, was a major tourist draw. But with the region under lockdown after a resurgence in coronavirus cases, the island's conservation park launched live penguin TV on Facebook and YouTube, attracting a first-night audience of nearly 800,000 on Tuesday. The island is home to the smallest species of penguin, fittingly called the little penguin, and also known as the fairy penguin. The live sessions, which are about an hour long, will continue even after virus restrictions are lifted in the state of Victoria, according to the park, for anyone who cannot go to the island. To other news now, New Zealand Mosque gunman Brenton Tyrant waived his right to speak at his sentencing hearing in Christchurch in a dramatic twist after the court heard more than 90 horrific victim statements. Take a look. Tyrant, who sacked his lawyers last month, had admitted 51 charges of murder, 40 of attempted murder, and 1 of terrorism over the attacks at the Al Noor and Linwood mosques in Christchurch on March 15 last year. Defendants in New Zealand have the right to address the court, and there had been speculation Tyrant would use his sentencing to promote his extremist views, leading to strict restrictions on media reporting the case. But when Judge Cameron Mander asked if he wanted to speak after sitting through 3 days of anguished and angry testimonies from more than 90 survivors and bereaved families, in which he was frequently called a loser and a coward, Tyrant declined. A court-appointed lawyer will make a brief statement on his behalf before Mander delivers his sentence on Tuesday. The Australian white supremacist, 29, is expected to become the first person in New Zealand imprisoned for life without prospect of parole. Now, a Christchurch courthouse is now filled with a mix of emotions, with victims scolding, giving tearful tributes, and sharing words of forgiveness in their testimonies on the third day of the New Zealand mosque attackers' sentencing hearing. Take a look.
But while you are in prison, you will come to reality that you are now in hell, and only the fire awaits you. Your father was a garbage man, and you became trash of society. He is ashamed of your identity. You deserve to be buried in a landfill.
I want to smell his garden sauce cooking. His cologne. Let it be known these tears are not for you, just to clarify. I want to hear his voice. I want to hear my dad's voice, my Baba's voice.
I've forgiven you, Brenton. Even though you murdered my 14-year-old son, so I must.
Britain's economy will lose about £22 billion this year on the coronavirus-induced collapse of global travel, which could imperil 3 million jobs, according to an industry body forecast on Wednesday. International visitor spending could plunge by 78% from 2019, equating to a loss of £60 million per day, or £420 million a week, the World Travel Tourism Council predicted in a key report. Now, the WTTC stated that travelers and tourists are staying away from the UK in droves because of continuing uncertainty around travel restrictions designed to curb the spread of COVID-19. It continued, the severe impact on UK and travel tourism is laid bare by WTTC as the economic fallout from coronavirus continues to burn its way through the sector. Nearly 3 million jobs in the UK supported by travel and tourism are at risk of being lost in a worst-case scenario mapped out by WTTC economic modeling. In Argentina, environmental activists clash with police after 2 people are detained as they gather to protest against talks between Argentina and China. The talks could let China invest in local pork production for export. Take a look.
para pagar la deuda externa. Es una convocatoria que se replica en las 23 provincias. Acá en la ciudad de Buenos Aires tiene como uno de sus puntos el rechazo al acuerdo con China por el traslado de las megafábricas de cerdos, pero se combina con el rechazo a la quema de humedales, al desmonte, a lo que está pasando en Córdoba.
A government-sponsored plan to turbocharge Argentina's hog industry with Chinese capital is generating unprecedented resistance among its supposed beneficiaries, according to the Argentinian general public, or the beneficiaries. China hopes that South American pork can make up for its bruising losses after the recent spread of African swine fever through its own hog herd, killing millions of animals. The ASF president does not sit well with the local environmentalists. With Argentina in the grip of a rapidly escalating coronavirus situation, the country now ranks 6th worldwide in the number of daily new cases, and many Argentinians are wary of the health risk posed by industrial-scale pig farming. American Airlines warned Tuesday it will lay off around 19,000 workers on October 1 after federal aid expires unless lawmakers vote to give beleaguered U.S. carriers more money. American has been forced to slash flights and seen thousands of employees depart under voluntary programs as it faces a sharp downturn in travel demand caused by the pandemic. But in a securities filing, the Texas-based carrier explained the job cuts are needed because flights have not recovered amid the coronavirus pandemic, and it will keep many planes grounded in the coming months. Approximately 19,000 of our team members will be involuntarily furloughed or separated from the company on October 1. A U.S. court has rejected a bid by the makers of Fortnite to reinstate the video game sensation immediately to the App Store, saying its eviction by Apple was a self-inflicted wound. District Court Judge Yvonne Gonzalez-Rogers' ruling gave Epic a partial victory, however, by ordering Apple not to limit Epic's ability to provide Unreal Engine key graphics technology for other apps. The judge acknowledged that Fortnite has passionate fans and people are turning to games as the pandemic keeps them home, but she added that companies must nevertheless abide by contractual agreements or work out conflicts in court. Apple pulled Fortnite from its online mobile apps marketplace on August 13 after Epic released an update that dodges revenue sharing with the iPhone maker. Apple doesn't allow users of its popular devices to download apps from anywhere but its App Store. The Silicon Valley-based tech giant told Epic it would cut off access to tools needed to tailor software for devices powered by the iPhone maker's operating systems. The company said without those tools, Epic will not be able to create iPhone, iPad, or Mac computer versions of its widely used Unreal Engine for powering rich graphics. Amid the pandemic, the Church of Christ members gave relief packages to senior citizens in Willow Center. Officials of the land participated in the event. Here's Kathleen May Pangan reporting from Canada.
The members of the Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, are delighted in celebrating their 106th anniversary today, July 27, 2020, by giving care packages to those who are in need here in Willow Center, number 61 Tyndall Avenue, Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. The Iglesia ni Cristo, or Church of Christ, through the leadership of their Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, through the Felix Y. Manalo Foundation, continues to show their love and care for the people who are affected because of the COVID-19 virus.
My name is Shannon Sakota, and I'm the property manager of Willow Center Incorporated. I think it's an excellent program, and we're very happy that you chose to come here and help our seniors, and we appreciate everything that you're doing for the seniors in our community, and we'd like to thank the Church of Christ.
Despite the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, the members are extremely inspired and motivated by their Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo, to help and show their love and care to their fellow men through the Aid to Humanity Outreach Program.
Thank you so much po, Ka Eduardo po, for your love to all of us. As we celebrate the 106th anniversary of the church, we feel your love for all of us. And we are so thankful po that you love us so much. From Manitoba, we would also like to extend our love po and our hearts and our loyalty. And on this day, we pray that we were able to bring glory to our Lord God and always po extend your love to the community here in Manitoba. The residents, those that have helped us, Kevin Lamoureux and Cindy Lamoureux and Malaya Marcelino po, they extend their thanks to the church for all that we have done to the community. And this is because you have taught us po. And under your leadership, we are so thankful that we are able to reach out to the community and show how much the Church of Christ truly loves our fellow men. We love you so much po.
Well, you know, a few things come to mind, and first and foremost, today actually marks a really important day because it marks 106 years of the Church of Christ. And here the Church of Christ is doing community events throughout the entire world. And today we happen to be in Winnipeg, and what makes this event extra special and close to heart for me is it's in the constituency I have the honor of representing inside of the Manitoba Legislature. And the event today is one of very many Aid for Humanity events that the Church of Christ and Brother Eduardo put on throughout the year, many times throughout the year, and it's just an opportunity to give back to the community. I'm happy 106 years, Church of Christ, and thank you for your continuous work.
We're here at the Forks in the center of Canada in Winnipeg, Manitoba. My name is Malaya Marcelino, and I'm the member of the legislature here in the province of Manitoba. I'd like to give my sincere congratulations to the brethren of INC worldwide under the faithful leadership of your Executive Minister, Brother Eduardo V. Manalo. Congratulations on your 106th anniversary. May you grow and continue to prosper and to continue the good works that you're doing to aid humanity here in Canada and around the world. Congratulations on your 106th. The Iglesia ni Cristo indeed is a positive force in society to members and non-members alike. Reporting for Eagle News from Manitoba, Canada, I am Kathleen Maypangan. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, Kathy. Now, before we close, we leave you with a word of hope. At the end of the day, there remains so much more to be grateful for. See you again tomorrow evening. Good night. I'm Alma Angeles. We live in interesting times.